listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. And today, we have another show lineup for y'all. We have our special guest. He's an author, a pastor, a presenter, and he is a pursuer of truth. His name is Cory Rosenke. He has a website, coryrosenke.com. Today, we're going to be talking about his book, The Magnetic Heart of God. And man, it's a page turner. I got a chance to get a little preview. And first and foremost, Cory, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Maya, it is great to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
So this book, man, let's jump into it. There are some 5 core points in this book that you are giving us as the 5 fundamental cravings of the soul. And that's security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. When it comes to writing this book, what's one thing that you're hoping you get across to the people who read it?
Thank you very much. What I'm really hoping for is that people will finally understand what they're looking for. You know, I often say that the globe is laced with the paths of educated and prosperous multitudes desperately looking for hope and meaning. And yet, hope and meaning in today's world are ambiguous. Peace is ambiguous. Happiness is ambiguous. And so my goal through this book has been to help people define and name what they're looking for, because it's only when we know what we're looking for that we can actually find it. And so we need to start defining these broad terms that we use, and so that we can actually recognize what we're looking for when we see it.
When you wrote this book, a lot of people have their way of dealing with their emotions and dealing with life and dealing with what they want and what they think they need. You really illustrate in the book basically all those things that people may experience.
Yeah. Well, what I often try to remind people of is something that we all intuitively know, but very few of us live like it. And that is that more than a brain or a body, you're a soul. I'm a soul. That is the core of who we are. And yet most of us spend our lives looking for satisfaction in biological things, when all the while we have this non-biological craving, the craving of the soul, that cannot ultimately be satisfied in biological things. And yet when we look around us, when we see the chaos around us, we see people searching for the wrong thing, hoping it'll bring satisfaction, then it won't. You know, I often point out that we live in an age of unprecedented prosperity. And by unprecedented, I mean like never before in the history of mankind have so many people been granted such unfettered access to modes of prosperity, to education, to comfort, to leisure, to entertainment. And yet virtually every study shows that we are more unhappy than ever. And I believe the reason for this is because we've been looking for peace and happiness in all the wrong places. And so a core goal of mine in writing this book is to, as I mentioned, to help people be able to name, this is what I'm looking for. And once we can do that, we have a chance of finding it. But as long as we can't name it, as long as it's ambiguous, we never find it.
In chapter 1, The Secret of Cravings, what are some examples that you can share with our audience, the type of cravings that you mentioned and how that can shape our actions?
Yeah. Well, I put forward in the book that all of humanity is propelled forward through life and time by the same 5 innate cravings. They are the core motivator for each one of us. They are the reason we enter into marriage. They are the reason we get divorced. They're the reason we try to climb the corporate ladder. They're the reason we change careers midstream. They are the reason that we do everything we do. And those cravings are security, as you mentioned, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. If you're looking at your spouse and wondering why they're behaving the way they're behaving, if you're looking at yourself and wondering why you're feeling the way you're feeling, if you watch the news and you see all these people acting in all these strange ways, what is the reason for all this? Well, I can tell you it has something to do with security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. And when we could finally view ourselves this way, and when we can finally see others for what who they actually are and what they're actually looking for, then we have the opportunity to actually collaborate. We have the opportunity to come together and be an encouragement for one another. But as long as we're looking at each other simply as disagreeable biological creatures or, biological hurdles that are standing between us and happiness, as long as we're viewing each other in that way, we will just be caught in the perpetuity of unhappiness. And so, as I mentioned, I really want people to look at this, read this book, and as many of people told me, for the first time, be able to see themselves and say, oh my gosh, now I know what I'm looking for.
With everything that goes on in today's world, like you said, we have access to information. I mean, AI is taking us by storm for both good and, not so good, depending on how you use it. Why is it so important for people to understand that besides the amount of information that we have access to, that maybe why knowing God better is much more powerful than actually having all that access to the information that we have today?
Right. Well, ultimately, I believe that these cravings were placed within us by our Maker for the purpose of drawing us into connection with our Maker. Because at the end of the day, peace and happiness can only be found in connection with our Maker. That's the way that we have been created. We were not created to live just in independence. And to me, that is a beautiful and an uplifting thought, to realize that I am designed to live in connection with our Maker. And the problem, as I mentioned, when we look at the world today, just think of right now, all the chaos that is happening all around us. I just got a message a few minutes ago from my school saying that the school is closed tomorrow because there have been threats made against the broader Bay Area communities, and that law enforcement is on edge. And it's not just tomorrow. It has been years and years and decades of people striving to find peace and not finding it. I often say this, we've been told for our entire lives, in fact, I would say almost throughout all of history, that if we would just reach the top of that financial mountain, we'll have peace. Or if we reach to the top of that sexual mountain or that democratic mountain or, that career, mountain, if we will reach the top, we will have peace. And ours is the generation that has climbed to the summit, and we've discovered that there's nothing there. And I believe that is why there is this widespread confusion, this agitation, this rage building up all around us. I heard a quote by Jim Carrey, the Canadian comedian, a while ago, and he says, my wish is that everybody experience riches and fame simply so they can discover that that's not the answer. And it's very true. It is unequivocally true. We look throughout human history. Rich people are not happy people. I think of even Elon Musk and, and the guy who owns Amazon. These aren't happy people. It's not that they're angry people, but there's an anxiousness inside them. And that is true of everyone. You think of movie stars. They finally become movie stars. They have all the money, all the fame, all the sex they can handle. And yet they are not happy people. And yet most of us live this lie thinking that if I could just feed myself more and more biological things, more money, more sex, more power, more enlightenment, more education, that somehow I will find peace. I believe the experiment has failed. And it's time for us to realize that what we are craving is not biological. And so we need to find biological solution. And until we turn our mind and our attention towards that type of pursuit, we will forever be just running on a hamster wheel, forever running and never finding happiness. And sadly, I think that we intuitively know this. So much so that there's a slogan that goes around, it's been going around for a couple of generations now, that says that, the joy is in the journey. It's like we've totally given up on actually reaching a destination that will bring rest and peace. I'll tell you, the idea that the joy is in the journey only lasts so long. And then we all realize we get tired, we get worn out, and we can't go another step. And what I want to remind people of is that you are a 3-part being, body, mind, and soul. It's important. We have biological needs that we have to meet. But more than any of them, we are non-biological creatures, and we have to answer our non-biological craving. Or what we see in the world happening today is just simply going to get worse. And so what I'm really hoping for is a happy revolution where people finally come to awareness of themselves. You are not just another animal. You aren't just another animal. You are made for something more. And I believe that each one of us were made in the image of God. And what that means is that we have been designed to live in connection with our Maker. And that is going to be the missing link for a lot of people. That is going to be what you need to have peace. That doesn't mean, hey, that we don't want to go to concerts, that we don't want to enjoy good food and drive nice vehicles. But that is not the solution to peace. That is not the meaning of life. And as long as that's what we're pursuing, we're going to keep getting what we've always got.
Talking to our guest today, Cory Rosenke. Go to his website, coryrosenke.com. And we're also talking about his book today, The Magnetic Heart of God. When it comes to identity, you kind of touched on that. But when we are trying to seek for answers to our questions about our own value and our own purpose, for some of us is easy to define, and some of us is not as easy to define. But to your point, even if we do find it, some of us find ourselves saying, now what?
Yeah. And that question of now what shows that we didn't find it. We found something that filled the void momentarily. The question of what is my purpose must be prefaced with the question of what am I? And for all of our great intellectualism today, all of our advancements in technology, somehow humanity struggles with this question. Who and what am I? And that is what I'm here to try to remind people. You are not just a brain and a body. You are not just a biological mass destined to roam the earth, hoping to find some sort of satisfaction in a fairy tale that you write for yourself. That is a meaningless existence. That is a hopeless venture. You were created for a good and beautiful purpose, and that is ultimately to live in connection with our Maker. That is, in my view, the greatest adventure of all. And so I talk to a lot of people. I talk to psychologists. I talk to doctors. I've talked to people of every different faith background. I've talked to people who self-identify as witches or mediums that speak to the dead. I'm just happy to talk to anybody. But what I want to help bring all of us to is that realization that we are more than we have thought we are. Every commercial on TV, every promise the government gives us is always based around this idea of biological need. And we are so much more. And so, as I said, regardless of whether we align on a faith background or even overall worldview, what we can agree on is that we are so much more. And what I really want to do is see people awaken to this realization, because that's going to help them. When you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But as long as it is ambiguous, which it is today, you won't find it. As an example, I often say that peace is the mega goal of all of humanity. It is what we are all searching for, that perfect place of existence where all fears are stilled and all questions are answered. And that is definable. We have left that peace as if it's something for people to define for themselves. It isn't. And that's good news. It's definable. You can understand it. Let me tell your listeners this. If you're looking for peace, let me tell you what you need. You need security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. And you need to feel fulfilled in all those 5 areas simultaneously. Not one can be missing. It's one of those things where I can feel safe in my home. I can know who I am. But if someone is making me feel guilty, I'm not at peace. Or I can feel innocent. I can feel special. I can know exactly who I am, but if I feel like someone's attempting to break into my home, I don't have peace. All 5 of these cravings have to be satisfied simultaneously. I will tell you this, there is nothing biologically that can satisfy these cravings simultaneously. We have to turn to the non-biological. And so that's my encouragement to your listeners. You are more than you think you are. You are more than the education system says you are. You are more than your government says you are. You are beautiful. You are made in the image of God. And so I just want to, if I can, be a spark that ignites an awakening for each individual. And for me, it's not about trying to convince you of my ultimate view of faith. I want to start by simply igniting in people the realization that more than a brain or a body, they are an eternal soul. And that is the point from where we can start to actually find the purpose of life, the meaning of life, and the joy of life.
And since you touched on independence, let's move to significance. When it comes to significance, you touched on how when managed properly, it can lead to great accomplishments, but if unhealthy, it can create conflict.
Yeah. All of our cravings I mentioned in the book, they are not good and evil in and of themselves. What makes them good or evil is the mode of pursuit, which we choose on their behalf. So as an example, in the case of significance, every human being on earth needs to know that they are significant in some way. We need to know that we are special. There is something about us. For some people, for Usain Bolt, I'm sure right now he needs to know that he's the fastest man on earth. And the day when someone breaks his record, it's going to be a hard day for him, because he is placed as significant in that. I'm just speaking hypothetically. I'm saying that's a possibility. He feels that way. Other people, they need to know that they make the best apple pie. We all need to have some way in which we feel significant. And there's a positive way to pursue that by working hard, by reaching high to achieve, by collaborating with the people around us to make something special and beautiful. Or the other way people do it is they squash the people around them. They oppress them. They crush them, thinking that somehow that makes them significant. There is a good way to pursue significance, and there is an evil way to pursue significance. And that is true of all of our cravings. It's the same thing with innocence. We all have this craving in us to not just be not guilty, but to be found righteous, to be found good. This is a very strong driver within each one of us. Think about it. Almost every argument you've ever had happened because you felt that someone was either indirectly or directly accusing you of wrongdoing or wrong thinking. And so your response was either to push back and fight or to run away. We all need to believe that we are good, that we are innocent. Almost every fight starts at that point. But I can pursue innocence in two ways. I can actually follow the law. I can love my neighbor. I can seek to do good in my community. That's a good way to pursue innocence. Or right? I can accuse people around me. I can deflect blame. I can refuse to own up to my responsibilities, and that'd be an evil way to do it, or what we would call evil, right? By pursuing it in that particular way. So yeah, definitely, the cravings themselves are not good or bad, but how we choose to pursue them or fulfill them is what makes something good or bad.
This is not in the book, but it made me think about it. Two things. One, God says that he gives us the free will. And two, I can't help but think about the prodigal son story. The whole idea of returning back home, if you will. Returning to the thing that was right all along. But at some point, we went astray and we had to go through some hard knocks before returning back to that safe place. So, in tying that to my first point of free will, we have the free will to go astray.
Yeah.
But your book is giving us the idea that some way, somehow, God's magnetic heart kind of draws us back if we feel it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. We have this free will. When I often get, as a pastor, I get often asked, if there's a God and if he's good, why is there so much destruction and chaos in the world? And the answer to that, that's a real question. Oftentimes when I'm asked that question, people are filled with pain, and I want to be sensitive to that. But the truth of the matter is, well, that is a valid question. It's not entirely honest, because the reason there's the chaos in the world today is because God, as an act of love, has given us free will. We choose to go out and be destructive. We choose to pursue our cravings in awful and sometimes even, dare I say it, despicable ways. And And so you're exactly right. That's why I call the book The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul. So God has given us free will, but he has placed within us these 5 cravings, which I believe they serve like a compass, drawing us back to the only place that we can actually find full fulfillment, true fulfillment. That's why I called it the magnetic heart of God. He has set us free to have that free will, as you mentioned, but not so much that he didn't say, I am going to place with you a homing device that will show you how to come home whenever you're ready. And you mentioned the story of the prodigal son, and I think that's so true. So many of us have got on the world saying, I'm going to do things my own way. I'm going to find peace and satisfaction on my own. And we get ourselves embroiled into all sorts of trouble, all sorts of heartache. But like that story of the prodigal son, our Maker waits for us and welcomes us home with open arms when we finally say, I need to go back to Dad. And that is my encouragement for all of your listeners, that at some point in their journey, they will come to that realization. And I just wish I could be there to see that reunion.
There's a section in your book, a conversation with Margaret and Big Tony. Mm-hmm. And he makes a statement to your point about trouble in the world. He says to Margaret, paraphrasing, you have to read the book, but mm-hmm. paraphrasing, that all sounds good, Margaret, but it got so good, like you said, your point earlier, why is this world so dark and filled with problems? And she responds to him saying, if we're honest, about, I'm paraphrasing, you got to read the book, but there's a lot of darkness in our own selves. Yeah. And God's the solution, but he's never been the problem.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And when we can come to that awakening and know, no matter how far you've gone, no matter what you've gotten yourself into, that we have a Heavenly Father who opens his arms and welcomes us home. I would just, regardless of where your listeners are at in life, I would want them to know that story, not just that story. I would want them to know that reality and that it's waiting for each one of us.
And also you have prayers in your book as well. You kind of touch on that and how you wanted to use that to be a part of the flow of the chapters. Yeah. I really wanted to, this book really walks the parallel lines of philosophy and psychology and theology. So there's some deep stuff that I have tried to make as simple as possible. And one of the ways I've tried to make it palatable is by injecting stories into it and prayers into it. And then at the end of a lot of the chapters, I also have a spot of like a self-reflection journal where you can pause and ask yourself some questions regarding those chapters. And I thank you for pointing that out. I did that specifically so that people wouldn't just read as an example, the chapter on innocence and then boom, jump to the chapter on identity. But they would have a chance to pause and digest it and meditate on it and really fully soak it in before they move on to the next chapter. Christians, and I say this lightly, not to get in trouble, but sometimes it can feel like cliquish. We have our own denominations. We have our own squad. We have our own, I picked this part of the Bible, I like it a lot. And the other part is, I don't talk about it as much. With the title of the book, The Magnetic Heart of God, is that a call for us to maybe kind of look beyond this category, if you will? What kind of Christian are you?
Very much so. In fact, I really believe that because we are 3-part beings, body, mind, and soul, and more than a brain or a body, we are a soul. We have more that unites us than divides us. See, we often get confused and pulled apart, frankly, by our obsession with the biological. We see our biological differences, our intellectual differences, our academic differences, and we see all these things that divide us. But at the core of who we are, boy, we are the same. We are made in God's image, and he placed these same 5 cravings. It doesn't matter if you're from Canada or India or South China or Afghanistan or where you are. We are all propelled through life and time by these 5 cravings. We can understand each other finally. In that sense, when we look at the cravings of the soul, we can speak the same language. And so I really appreciate you pointing that out. Absolutely. This understanding our non-biological selves, our souls, is what unites us at an unprecedented level. And I would just love to see a holy or a happy revolution in our nation, across the world for that matter, where we stop just looking at each other with biological eyes and with biological ambitions, but we begin to look at each other more holistically. I believe that is the key to unity. That is the key to external peace in our pursuit of internal peace.
Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Cory Rosenke, and you can get his book is coming out, The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul. That's coming out in the future, right?
That is coming out on December 12th, and it's available for pre-order now, basically at any bookstore you can imagine. If you just search The Magnetic Heart of God or Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul, it will pop up at a store near you. And I got to tell you, I am just excited to see what's going to happen. The people that have read this so far, the people who I've been able to share this with, have experienced a real life transformation because their view of themselves has changed. The view of their spouse has changed. The view of that politician they hate has changed. And I'm just excited that the more people that can come to this awareness, just the positive possibilities are endless.
And people can go visit your website, CoryRosenke.com, for more information. So, man, once again, make sure you get the book. It is a page turner. I got to read a lot of it before the interview and definitely will be finishing it. Once again, it will be out December 12th on Amazon or anywhere you get a book, and you can pre-order it right now. I want to say thanks again for your time, Cory.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.